Hello, good evening, everyone. How are you? I hope you're doing well. I'm just making sure that I do my usual, which is make sure that I'm live in public. So let me take care of those housekeeping details and just say welcome, 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 welcome tonight. Welcome to this conversation, which is, I think, a very, very important conversation. And so I just want to make sure that we're all in the house and pacing ourselves for a good conversation. So I again want to just say welcome. Let me make sure again our privacy is set and we're good. Perfect. So I want to say hello and good evening to everyone. If you are watching this on the replay, welcome to you too. I know that the way our media works now, we don't have to watch things in the moment. I mean, I used to run home from school to watch everything in the moment. We don't have to do that anymore. So if you're watching this on the replay, I want to say hello to you as well. You may notice something a little bit different tonight, or that side. My partner isn't going to be joining me tonight, but we do have a very, very special guest joining us, and for a very important conversation. I do want to say that. So, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. And that is a subject that is very near and dear to my heart. I'm very transparent about my own struggles with my mental health. And I'm very hopeful about how our understanding about mental health has shifted in this generation in ways that they hadn't when I was first diagnosed. So tonight we're talking about mental health. We're talking about, and how you say, is that tied to glasses? It's tied to glasses because we're about vision. And sometimes it is so important to look around you and to assess what you see in yourself, how you feel about yourself, take a pulse on your own mental health. So, what are you seeing? Sometimes it's really important to know what you're seeing in others so you can extend that hand to them. Hey, are you okay? We've come to a point in our own understanding about that question. It's almost like it's a rhetorical question, right? How are you? And people say, what? Fine. It just rolls off the tongue. Whether you're fine or not, we say fine. And so many people we know are not fine. Um, I'm not going to disclose a little bit too much, but it's sort of our pattern, being fine when we're not really fine. So earlier when I was talking to NOJ about our show, I knew that she had gone through something today. And so my first thing was, are you okay? Right? Because I'm seeing, are you okay? And she wasn't, but she said she could still be here. And then she called, which I was so glad for, to say, you know what? I'm not okay. And as a result of not being okay, pardon me, I can't come on tonight. And I think it is so critical for us to just be aware, check in with ourselves, check in with ourselves. Um, there's a lot going on in the world. There's a lot going on in our communities. There are a lot going on with our families and friends. And especially in the world of social media, it can be so easy to look around at everybody else and think they're doing so good. They look so happy. Their pictures tell you this story. But really, everybody's fighting a battle that we don't understand. And so tonight, I'm excited to be bringing to you a mental health professional, and she will come onto this call at 10 o'clock because she's got another commitment. But I want us to talk about mental health tonight. I want us to talk about glasses. I want us to talk about what's going on and what you're seeing. So, Mental Health Awareness Month is May. And, when we say mental health, I encourage us to think about our mental health the way we think about the rest of our health. There are a lot of us who spend a lot of time. I mean, if you guys know me, I'm always physically, I'm skating or I'm dancing. Our physical health is the one we've been taught to really, really focus on. Get those abs, which I don't have abs. But when it comes to our mental health, it's almost like our body starts here down to our feet. Like this is what healthcare focuses on. And so seeing the shift in starting to focus on our mental health is huge, right? So I just want us to think about the ways that we are attending to our needs. So let me see who's out here. If you're out here and you're watching tonight, please make a comment. Please tell me who you are. Please tell me a bit about what you understand, how you know when you're mentally well and you're on game, right? And the times that you feel shaky. So for all those people who this last week was my birthday, and I celebrated quite a bit. I was very, very, very fortunate um, to be surrounded by a lot of love, to be surrounded by so many good things. And what's funny is that so many times we feel like, if we love people enough, if people have these things, they'll be happy and they'll be fine and they won't be depressed. But unfortunately, mental health doesn't work that way, right? Mental health sometimes means that sometimes it's chemical, sometimes it is situational, right? And so even though I was getting all this love this weekend for my birthday and it was really, really life affirming, in the times in between those gatherings, I was grappling with this immense sense of anxiety around um, just being the spotlight or all of those things, self-doubt, right? But it is rooted in a lot of my own understanding about how do I ground myself when I don't feel sure. So I guess that's part of the conversation tonight if you're watching. Um, my story is that at 15 I was diagnosed with chronic depression. Chronic depression. I was hospitalized then at 15 for the first time. And at that time, the language that we have today about depression and chronic depression, they didn't have then. So you were termed crazy. That was it. Like if you were depressed or if you had anxiety, you were just crazy. I'm using my quote fingers because I know now that that isn't the case at all. Um, we're all so different. We're all so, we all have home cultures and we all have DNA. We know that depression, from what I've learned, depression runs in families. We know that our mental health is in our DNA. It runs in families. So it was very affirming to know that it wasn't just me. Excuse me one second. Pardon me. Yeah, so it was very affirming to learn that I wasn't the only one grappling with mental health. So it took me a long time. It wasn't until I was into my let me see, into my 30s. So I spent half of my life feeling really, really unsure about my own mental health, my own sense of who I was with this diagnosis. And so now when people say, "Oh, you seem so joyful," I still have inner work to do. There's still a lot of work to do when it comes to mental health. I'm I see a therapist every other Tuesday at 2:30, and I have not missed an appointment with my therapist because that's my health. So it's like going to your doctor for an ailment. I go because that's how I manage my mental health. So before we introduce um, our practitioner who's coming on, who is Natasha Halliday, I want to go through a few frames because green is the color for Mental Health Awareness Month. So I want to get that out of the way because I know our conversation with this practitioner is going to be so on point. So let's go through a few frames. So as you can see, I'm wearing a green frame today. Green is the ribbon color for mental health awareness. So tonight, the frames that I've selected to show are green, which green is my favorite color along with yellow. I love green because green is life-giving. It reminds me when I wear it, whether it's in a frame, that tomorrow's going to be better. Tomorrow, even if today was a terrible day, that if I have the opportunity one more time, tomorrow there's a possibility that things could be better. And so green represents new life, new opportunities, new beginnings, and I'm here for it. All right. So my first frame tonight is a green metallic frame, and I do want to show that to you. It's a cat eye frame. It has a lot of detail here. And so this is one of my green frames, and we have these in stock. I love this because it's a metallic green. It's very rich. I love the color. You can wear it with a nude lip. You can wear it with a green, and it pops any color. I would wear this with white. It's beautiful. A beautiful frame, and the detail is also on the arm. So you can see this very lovely frame. And it has some celestial things, so a star, a moon. So I love the detail of this frame. So this is our first frame tonight. It's a green. We call this one arsenic. All right. So my second frame for tonight is a chartreuse and black. So chartreuse is kind of a yellow, kind of a green, but I love this print on these frames. So it's a nice black and white print. I mean, chartreuse and black print. It's a cat eye again. It is very nice detail. This I would wear with a very nice fitted black dress or a pantsuit. It pops, it's fabric, and it is a really beautiful frame. So I want to show you that. That is my second frame tonight. I pulled 4 frames. So for my third frame tonight, I've pulled a square frame, and this is a very nice pop of green. So it's different from a deep green. It is a square frame. And I love this. I love this green. You can see that the hatch cutouts here on the side. We have this frame in red and also in silver. It is a nice green. Again, I love the way this frames the face and where it sits on the bridge. So it's a metal frame, another metal frame, but a different shape. So this is a square. All right. And for my last frame tonight, just got these in. This is, I think this is kind of like an octagon. It's a square, but it's got a nice cutout. It's metal and also a plastic. So you can see the green arms and the green, it's a green tortoise. So I like this frame. You know, I kind of miss going back and forth with my buddy here because we're really honest about our frames. So hopefully she'll leave some commentary about this. But these are the 4 frames for tonight. So I hope you enjoy those looks. So how are you been? How have you been? So I've asked, you know, how you've been. Hopefully, if you're in the comments, when I say how have you been, please don't say fine. Let me know how you've been doing, because I think this is so important to a deeper conversation around what's happening with mental health. You know, one of the stats that I read recently was just about how the pandemic has affected us, right? So we had this whole era of time, like that we've been affected by the pandemic. We lost people. So there was immense amounts of collective grief, right? And so we're dealing with that. We're dealing with the reality of what's happening across the other side of the world, which impacts us. Like we're all connected as human beings. And so we feel one for another. We do, and so when we hear things, whether um, it's what's happening in Palestine, what's happening here, what's happening in the political spectrum, our plates can only hold so much. And so I always ask myself, what are you doing to make sure that you're not, sort of falling prey to all of the news? So when I was younger, and we all remember this, if you're in my generation, the news came on at 11 and they would announce, it's 11 o'clock, do you know where your children are? And the news would end at about 11:30, and at midnight or close to that, they would play these bars on the screen, and that was the end of television. Television was not a 24-hour thing. Television wasn't something you could carry around in your hand. Television was over, and we disconnected from that, and that was it. Now we have 24-hour news cycles. So you constantly have access to the news. You have news on Instagram. You have news on Facebook. You have news before, with everything. It's constant news. And so a conversation about how we compartmentalize that for our own mental health. A lot of times I read a lot of things and I feel like, oh, it doesn't have an impact on me. This isn't like, I'm just reading it, right? But words have power. The media that we consume impacts how we feel. I know this because this last year I went away, I was gone for about 8 weeks, out of the country. And I don't even think I watched news one time. I might have gotten a few snippets of news on my phone, but I really wasn't engaging with it in the way that I feel compelled to when I'm here in the US because, there's just this curiosity, there's veracity for news. And I I felt so much better emotionally when I could unplug from the news. When I allowed myself to just disconnect from that, I felt healthier. I felt emotionally better. And I've made a commitment to that same practice now that I'm home because I know it makes a difference. I'm mindful about connecting in real life is another thing that I do for my mental health. It's so easy to think you know what's going on with somebody online, but online is so different. So this weekend when I had my birthday party, there were so many people that I hadn't seen in real life. The opportunity to hug them, to hold them, to connect to them, um, just made a difference to my mental health. So I encourage you to connect in real time. It doesn't have to be going out to brunch, or it can be walking. Like I have a friend that I know I have to call and say, "Hey, can we go for a walk?" Because I can tell from their social media presence that they might be grappling with something. Let's connect, right? And so I think about that in terms of, you know, my physical health impacts my mental health. So when I'm physically able to be active, sometimes I'm not physically able to be as active as I want. So I might do a chair stretch. I have been a fanatic about my sleep hygiene. So I make sure that I get good sleep at night. I get good rest. Rest is huge, right? Rest is huge. How are you resting? How are you sleeping? That makes a difference in how we show up every day. So I think about that. I think my goal is 6 hours a night. I rarely, if ever, hit that, but I'm trying to. Sometimes I wake up at 5.5 and I will encourage myself to go back to sleep. To get the 6 hours, I have to go to bed earlier because I'm an early bird. So I have to do that. I also felt like my mental health got a lot better when I made a commitment to shifting my diet, the things that I ate. I don't eat as much sugar. That helps a lot. Um, Alcohol. was huge for me in terms of just in socializing with drinks, normalizing that. I've tried to have some intentionality around that because when we're drinking to suppress the problems that we can't face, um, when you sober up, you realize that they can still be there. So it's really important to think about how you're dealing with that stress. And so during this mental health month, I'm going to encourage you. I just really want to encourage you to think about what you need to be your best self. To be, sometimes it's space. You know, I love to take time to rest and write. And, I'm not saying that these things erase mental health issues, but I think there's strategies. And so I'm excited to be in when I can't wait till Natasha gets on the call with me because I think that when we can identify what the challenges are for ourselves, it's easier to come up with strategies to help us to be better about it. So if you're on tonight and you have any comments or questions or things that you would like to share about how you address your mental health, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear from you. May is Mental Health Month, but we know that the numbers for people who are struggling to get care are going up. My friends who are therapists, they say there aren't enough therapists, right? There aren't enough therapists to deal with the amount of help that we need in terms of that. So I'm encouraging you to talk to somebody if you need to. If you can't find a therapist right now, connect with a friend. Our isolation can be such a factor in our ability to be well, right? And I know, I hear millennials tell me all the time, "Oh, I don't I don't really interact with people that much. I like to be by myself. I like my privacy." But I think it's really important to just make sure that you're checking in with yourself and you know your rhythm. You know you know how you feel when you're just not feeling your best. Um, I know the signs for myself. So when we say seeing is believing, there are a few things that I see when I know that I'm getting into my sad place. Some of that is insomnia. That might be not taking care of my physical health needs. And I'm so excited to be adding Natasha to this conversation. Good to see you. I'm going to bring you on. Welcome.
Hey, okay, so that's so funny. I saw you and I'm like, I'm wearing a green sweatshirt too. See, it says
Oh,
you are
you're
enough.
enough.
Yeah. It has a message on the back too, but I'm not backwards. So
Well, I've been on for about 30 minutes, and so we have another half of our show. I just want to say welcome to
thank you.
you, and for the work that you're doing. It's Mental Health Awareness Month, and so this conversation is just so important. Usually, this is a conversation with Nicole and I, but um, you know, things happen, and so I want to talk to you about Mental Health Awareness Month, um, the work that you're doing, and how we can look for the signs in ourselves and in others when we're just to address this. And I want to say good evening to Pam, who's also joining us tonight.
Hi. Sorry, I'm trying to share it.
Okay,
Share it the lives to my page. So
perfect.
I it just made a noise. So now that's done. Hi.
Hi.
So yes, May's Mental Health Awareness Month. Actually things have expanded a lot. So May's Mental Health Awareness Month in Canada during Mental Health Week, which was I think May 6th to the 12th. The theme was compassion. And I
Mm,
was just like, so I ended up going live with a friend who's also in social services who works as a mental health clinician as well. And we had a discussion about compassion about about 2 weeks ago, because such an important part of someone's mental health journey, both
Mhm.
as how do people who support people show compassion for themselves and for the individuals they're supporting? How does one who might be dealing with mental health issues show compassion for themselves? How do family members supporting loved ones show compassion, both for the experience of their loved one and for themselves as somebody supporting a loved one with mental health? So I think like compassion is really, I'm so glad that was a theme this year. It's such an important thing to touch on. And I learned last year in 2023 that now July they have is BIPOC Mental Health Month.
Oh, nice,
Yeah.
nice.
So I know in March we have Black Mental Health Day. So there's, I think there's an understanding of when we're looking at mental health, when we break it down into even more specifics, we can target people based on their specific unique experiences navigating mental health.
Yeah, I was thinking about how, this our show is about seeing, it's about vision, it's about our frames. But how do you know what to look for when in yourself and in others when you're checking in for somebody who might be in a situation where they need support? How do you how do you know what to look for? What do we see?
Well, I think checking in is a really good way to phrase it. One of the things, and I know I date myself when I say this, but one of the things I tell people to do is think about the older tuner radios where you have the little lines where the stations were and you would turn a dial. And I often encourage people to do that, to turn their dials, because when you aren't right in line with a station, they're static. And when you're checking in with yourself, keep tuning till you get that clarity, because you learn stuff about yourself when you actually look within and check with yourself. And I think a lot of what's happening in our society is there's a lot of externalization, a lot of distraction. And so we could be missing things. I remember near the beginning of the pandemic, my dad was hospitalized and people were like, how are you doing? I'm like, I'm okay. And then one day I was like, no, I am not okay. It is a pandemic. I'm working in mental health. I was getting online every other night to like do webinars with different organizations to support people
Mhm.
in their mental health, navigating the pandemic. And then my dad got hospitalized 2.5 hours away from where I lived, and I was stressed out, but I wasn't checking in at first to be honest and to be aware. And so I need this reminder, even as a mental health practitioner. But we all need to know: are we checking in with ourselves? Do we know what our okay versus not okay is? And are we accepting that it's okay not to be okay? And
Yeah,
then,
how do you know? I guess that's the thing. Like, so knowing your baseline, right? I think as an I'm older now, and so I get it. I know when I'm like not feeling my best, and sometimes I allow myself to sit with that. I
Mhm,
can sit with this. I'm just having a moment, and I allow myself to sit with whatever I'm feeling.
mhm,
But sometimes because we don't always have language, we've been conditioned to be like, someone says, "How are you?" You're like, "Oh," like you just said, "I'm fine."
fine.
I'm fine. But because nobody, I always felt like, what would it sound like if I was like, somebody said, "How are you?" And you're like, "Well, my dog died and then this happened and then like, I don't want to be that person, right?" So fine seems easy, but I guess now I've learned that to pause with that, and to, when someone asks me, say like, I, I'm having a moment. I'm not okay today, but maybe tomorrow I'll feel better, or maybe I need a little rest, or I learned to try to find words for what I'm feeling in that moment.
Mhm. And I think what's great about that is your transparency teaches people that they can be transparent. So it's almost like who's going to be the first person to take that risk to be honest and not say fine when they're not fine. Because most people get uncomfortable and kind of want to go into fix it mode, but a lot of us aren't looking to be fixed.
No,
We're looking to be just recognized for our human experience,
to be seen.
to be seen. Exactly. And so it's when somebody says, I'm not okay, can you just be present with that? And, because chances are, if you're looking for help, you're going to ask for it. And people, I hope, can recognize we're not all experts in everything. we might hear, can you help me with this? And we might not be able to. And it's okay if we can say, rather than me trying to do something and creating more harm by me getting involved in something that I don't know about, offer help as you can do it. So one thing I used to do, and I used to joke about like cheating the system. I worked in hospitals and all these different settings, and there's all these rules about you can't touch people. And I'm like, I'm a hugger. That is how I show love and comfort. So every once in a while, I'd be like looking around. I'm like, do you want a hug? And I would give my patients hugs. Or like even with my colleagues, sometimes I would be like, I can't change your situation, but I'm a woman who believes in prayer. Can I offer to pray for you? And most of the time it's not in the moment. It's just saying, can I pray for you? Because people often feel comforted knowing somebody's praying about their situation.
Yeah,
And I offer what I have versus trying to pretend I have something I don't.
right. That makes total sense. And I think about that. I think about how, um, like, what is it that prevents us from being willing to be transparent? Is there shame around it? And I think historically with mental health, I was talking earlier about the fact that I was first diagnosed with chronic depression at 15, but there wasn't even language for that. And I was hospitalized and I was called crazy, uh, because that's just what we did, right?
Mm.
There's so much more nuance than that now. And so we know that people are struggling with situational depression. Like maybe it's a situation that they're in. Like I know there's a housing crisis right now. That's enough to drive you up a tree, right? Like if you don't know where you're going to be. So you're situationally depressed. Then you have depression that comes from just our consumption of media. Like we're taking in all of these messages constantly. We get more news in a year than our forebears had in a lifetime.
This
Like,
is why I don't understand CNN and in Canada CP24. I don't know why people watch those stations because you are being inundated with like it's on the screen. There's something saying like there's a visual, a video. Then there's something scrolling across the bottom. You've got the weather. You've got something else. I'm like, it's highly stimulating, and I'm like, that's too much bad news all at once.
and then you have your phone.
Yeah.
So constantly, right? And I saw the difference that made when I was away and I wasn't consuming news.
Hmm.
And it's funny because my dad shared that he's born in the 40s, and he shared that in the countryside that he lived in, it took so long for the news to get there. So a news story would happen and they wouldn't know in their village for 60 days. It
Wow.
was still the news, but you just when you know about it doesn't make it any different. Like we think we're informing ourselves to protect ourselves from something, but really what we're doing is we're just consuming so much that we don't where do we put that? I
Right.
guess
And
that's the
can
question.
I address the word you use, consume is the perfect word because I think people forget we don't just consume with our mouths, we consume with our eyes and our ears. And somebody with food allergies, food sensitivities knows. I know you have some food sensitivities, right? There's certain things you can't consume or else you'll get sick. Why aren't we taking in the same perspective about what we take in through our eyes and our ears? So I know that I work as a person supporting people with their mental health. I stopped watching the news years ago because I'm like, I can't be a therapist all day long and sit in that space and then come home and watch the news. And then what? So I stopped watching the news. I still have ways I get information about what's happening, but I had to be aware of what was too much for me. If it's not too much for somebody else, that's fine. But I had to know what works for me. And I think that's why I love your choice of word with consume, because if we thought about it like consumption, could we monitor it like the way we monitor our diets?
Mhm. Absolutely, I love that. Pamela Moore said, you asked about my trip tonight. I went before this podcast, I was ballroom dancing, and Pam is my instructor. She's brilliant. She's my instructor. And she said, you asked about my trip tonight, and I immediately overshared. I needed to tell someone how I was feeling, and I loved that you immediately shared remedies that work for you so timely. Number one, it's not oversharing. It was fine. we share because we're human beings, and that's what we do one to another, right? um and I feel very, very um blessed to be a container, to like to be able to have the capacity to hold that for you, Pam. So I hope that that everything is well. I think that's the thing. Like, we are containers that hold stuff for people. Therapists like you, Natasha, you're holding space for people to be able to present that. And I think so long we've had language like, oh, that's my personal business. So I'm oversharing. People ask because they care. And I think um, our capacity to hold space for people is important, but also our capacity to know when we can't, right? Can we talk about that? Like,
Oh, absolutely. This is a conversation I have regularly with people, with my clients, and I have to have it with myself. Right? It's one of those I'm not just the president, I'm also a client type deals, right?
right?
I have to remind myself of the stuff that I talk to my clients about because I'm like, we do ourselves a service by assessing regularly what our capacity is, which
Mhm.
can change throughout the day, right? We sometimes like beat ourselves up. I used to be able to do this, and why am I not doing it right now? What's taxing you more right now that you don't have the same capacity, right? So, what I find beautiful, I have some friendships now where, you know, a friend will call me or I'll call a friend and say, do you have space?
Mhm.
And I can handle hearing no. They can handle hearing no, but we check with one another because we recognize sometimes we just don't have the space, the capacity to be that container, right? I actually, and I have one here, it's almost empty, but I show people all the time my water bottle. And I said, if you think about the water bottle like your body, and it's the water being in how much stress you hold, at any given day, you have to see where you're at. And so if you're near here and somebody's got a whole lake full of stuff you don't have capacity. Because once you get to the top, it overflows. And last I checked, the overflow is not pretty for many of us.
Mhm. It's
And
true.
so being honest to say, you know what, I don't. But it doesn't mean I'm not going to another time and I'm willing to be that when I have the space. But right now I don't.
Right. It's true. I had a friend that visited me one day, and we were talking, and for me, sometimes it is the subjects can be triggering. So
Mhm.
I can't remember what we were talking about, but I knew that I didn't when this subject, whether it's maybe it was molestation, for instance, they wanted to unpack that, and I felt like it's a piece of luggage. Hey, wait a second. You can't I can't if you unpack that bag with me here, I don't have the tools to help you put everything back in the suitcase when you're done. But I do have the name of somebody who can be that container for you. But if
Mhm.
you unpack that, I'm nervous that we won't be able to get it all back in the suitcase, the emotional suitcase, because that's a tough topic for me. That's a tough one. Like, it's a tough one. And so I think relationships are important. Building bridges. Hey, good night, fam. Um, Connecting there. So how do you navigate the tough triggering things?
Um, I think again, that goes back to that checking in with self. One, we have to have the awareness of what might be triggering. And the hard part is sometimes it's not till we're triggered that we know that
Well,
might be,
yeah.
right? Like I'm trying to think of an example. Went to a funeral many years ago. I didn't even know the person that well, but it was somebody I went to church with and had some relationship with. And a few days later went to school and we were doing an activity where we were supposed to bring in a song that had meaning to us. And I'm sitting through class and you know how much I love music, so I'm singing along in my head and I'm jamming. And then somebody played a song that had been played at the funeral.
Mhm.
And my whole body, it just the flood of emotion just came up and I had to excuse myself. And I was so overwhelmed because it brought me right back to being in that moment of the funeral. And it's not like I have bad feelings towards a song. It's just it invoked something in me now based on having had that experience.
Right.
Right? So we don't always know what's going to come up. Some people know there's some topics already that they don't think they can have space for, right? And I think again, I think the more transparent we are, the more we can, and how we handle it is part of it. If we rush to get away from it, it's almost like saying, yeah, that's bad, that's icky, that's whatever. But just, being going, wow, that's a lot, but I don't know how to support you with that,
Mhm.
and being honest. And I like what you said, maybe having an offering for, I know somebody you can speak to, right? Another way maybe to approach it is there another way that I can support you? Is there anything else you want to talk about? Or, sometimes I think one of the things people fear often is when somebody's been through something, especially something like death, like they've had a loss. People always want to talk about that loss. But
Mm.
sometimes I don't want to be the person whose loved one just died. Sometimes I just want to be Natasha. So can you hold space for me allow me to be just Natasha, not Natasha who lost so and so?
Absolutely.
Right? Can you have a different type of conversation with me? Can we talk about the latest season of Bridgerton, or which I haven't watched, but
Can't
whatever,
wait.
right?
I'm just starting.
No, I haven't watched season 3.
I haven't either, but I'm gonna get there.
But, like, I remember when my sister passed away, one of my colleagues who I was friends with contacted me, and she's like, hey, I know you like this book and they've made a movie. Do you want to go see it? And it meant so much to go see a fluffy, no challenging thought movie, because for once I was just me.
Mm.
I felt people were like looming over me going, are you okay? Are you okay? And I loved the concern, but it's like, there's some moments where I don't want to be seen that way.
Mhm.
Right. So I think there's that element. But there's something else that I find very fascinating. I work as a therapist, and I have every client who cries apologizes. And I started thinking about that. I realized we must be getting the message all the time of don't cry so frequently that we've now demonized tears, despite the fact that there's a physiological chemical release that happens that is good for you. And it's a natural byproduct of being frustrated, being angry, being sad. So, why is there such a negative connotation? And I think people say don't cry partly because they're uncomfortable with other people's tears.
Mhm.
But again, could we realize I don't need to change your situation? I can just be present with you for a moment. Yes, it might be uncomfortable,
So
but can I
hard
sit with you in the discomfort?
because when you see people hurting, you want to fix it. Like, I think there's just this thing. I see you hurting, and my first instinct is to help. I
Right,
want to help you, and because nobody wants to see that a person hurting. Like,
right.
so helping, I guess, understanding what it would look like to help. When you talk about death, I think one of the big lessons for me this year was that grief just isn't death. Grief is goodbyes. Grief is grieving abilities that I had last year that I don't have this year. Grief is transition. You know, the kids that I had that, were clamoring around, they're adults and living their own adult lives. I grieve that sometimes. I
Mhm,
miss that. I miss the familiar, right? And I know that things are constantly changing, but there's grief around that,
mhm,
and so recognizing that grief isn't just death. Death is like the one we always go to the quickest, right? But you can grieve so many things.
absolutely.
Like, I grieve black cake. Seriously, I cannot eat black cake anymore. It's my favorite thing, but I just can't have it anymore. And I think so. I sit down and I savor the times that I did have it, and I sit with that grief, and hey, it's a food thing, but it's still something.
But that's the fascinating thing. I think people might hear you say you grieve black cake, but I'm like, people might be, I always say scan out and see the bigger picture. You don't just grieve the black cake, you grieve the experiences connected to it, because now you don't get to experience them the same way. You go to a wedding and
Wedding,
right?
that's the big one.
Holidays, like that changes how you experience all the things that black cake is tied to in your life.
culturally. Yes.
Yeah. So it's
For
not
me,
that
so
you have the whole experience gone, but a part that was like a real big part of it is no longer there.
and I think when we talk about, just grappling with our feelings, like I understand what it was like to have feelings as a child, and I allowed myself those feelings because I was a child then. But now it's like, can I be a grown up and still feel sad when, like, there are times when I'm just kind of sulky when I don't know, like if my partner goes away for a weekend, I'm like, well, I feel sad, but I don't allow myself to feel that way because I'm a grown up. I should be doing better. I shouldn't be sad about that, because I should know better.
So you
Don't
want
you
to hear the
ever get
image
to know
thing that
better?
I teach my clients about this kind of stuff?
Yeah.
The many ways we suppress our emotions, because I like to bring my silly side into therapy. I say, think about it like this. It's like needing to fart and you're keeping it in. So I said, when we're stuffing our emotions, they're not really going anywhere. So we're just bottling them up inside and they often come out. And I'm like, think about a fart. Like you hold that in too long, it's going to stink when it comes out. Like this is this is not the prettiest way to think about it, but sometimes just putting it into something else that's a bit amusing allows people to really think about what's happening. But I think, again, I always look at how do we get to these spaces? And I think, unfortunately, society is teaching us we should never have pain, right? So many things are instant. We don't have patience for slow internet. Everything's now this, live like you're golden, all these messages about living a pain free life. But pain is a natural part of life. And I'm not saying seek pain, but if we always flee pain, we don't realize we end up creating it in other ways. And I'll give
Mm,
the most prime example I see with my clients is when people have been hurt by people and I hear, I don't do people, I'm never going to be in a relationship again, and all these self protective measures. And I'm like, but are you lonely? Yes. Is that painful? Yes. So to avoid the pain of being hurt, you've created a new pain of being lonely. You haven't removed pain, you've traded one for another because we often think we can live pain free lives, but we can't. So just like how we're trying to teach people to say it's okay not to be okay, can we normalize that pain is a part of life?
right.
And
It's an indicator, right?
I would say pain is a communicator.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
put my hand on a hot stove, that pain I feel communicates this, I'm going to get burnt. And it communicates you shouldn't have your hand on a hot stove. So I try to look at it from the perspective now when I have pain, what's the pain telling me? Is the pain when I have a headache telling me I haven't had enough water? I'm under stress because there's different types of ways we experience headache. If I'm experiencing an emotional pain, what is it telling me? Is it telling me, yes, it's hard to deal with A, B, and C, and I have to learn to deal with it, but I have to accept that it is painful? But I always ask myself, what's the pain communicating? Because then I get to move through it and heal through it versus trying to avoid it and find new ways to create pain.
Right. Absolutely. My cousin said here, I say let it all out. That was like based on your fart comment. Goes a long way just listening and going on long walks. Like I think I think there's this calisthenic part of mental health too, where it's a body mind connection. So when I'm moving, I know that it helps me. When I'm have the ability to skate or dance or move my body, it helps me mentally. Like I love walking. I could
Mhm,
walk from here to the moon. I love it so much. Um, but again, there is that connection, and so we lean into that. I know there's some chemical reaction that happens when you're moving your body when it comes to your mental health.
mhm.
Can you talk about that?
Well, I think a part of what you're addressing is the fact that one of the ways that we look at addressing our mental health is recognizing we can't siphon and put in silos ourselves because we're multi-dimension beings. So as a
Mhm.
therapist, I'm like, I don't care what your spirituality is. Don't try to convert me to it. I'm not going to try to convert you to mine. But how do we bring that into part of the practice? Are we
Mhm.
speaking to your soul, to your spirit, to your body, to your mind? All these different things. So our minds and our bodies are connected. If we move, we literally like move stress out of us. I think anxiety, for example, I feel like it's like an energy that gets bottled up. And an
Mhm.
anxiety attack is the release because there's no elsewhere, again, like the water bottle, when it gets to the top, there's nowhere for it to go. And so it just comes out. So we can use movement to intentionally release the anxiety, to intentionally release energy that doesn't serve us so that we have more capacity on any given
Absolutely.
day because we don't know what's coming. If again, back to the water bottle, let's just say it was pretty full. If I pour it out through stress relieving activities, then I have more capacity when something I can't control comes my way. And I
Right.
think movement's a perfect example of that.
Right before it was funny, I had all these celebrations for my birthday this last weekend,
Happy
and
birthday.
thank you. And especially for the last one, I was really, really anxious. And my friend had to say, the people that are in that room, they love you. And it didn't matter what she said. I still felt this real sense of anxiety around just being in the spotlight, I think. So I
Mhm,
had that. And so I was really intentional about how I moved into that space. I wanted to be left alone in the house. So Bomani and Kafili went on to the hall, and I stayed for a second at home. One of the things that I do to move to get my anxiety together is I do a butterfly
mm,
tapping, and that tapping helps to calm me.
mhm,
So I tap, then I got my clothes on, got myself together, got myself grounded enough to be able to move through that. But I think, I've learned tapping, like strategies that help, to move this energy. So much of it comes from, for me at least, unresolved childhood things that creep up where I say, "Oh, I'm over that." I'm not. So that anxiety, when it's there, I sit with it. I allow it to be there with me for as long as I need it to be. I acknowledge that's what I'm feeling in the moment. Deep breath, and I get it together.
mhm. One of the modalities of therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, they talk about notice and name. So just like you said, you notice something's happening, and the naming is saying, this is anxiety, this is fear, this is sadness. Because once you already name what it is, you already get into a position where you're a step closer to knowing how to intervene. And but I like what you said too. There's an element of just sitting in it
Mhm.
because again, when we give ourselves the message of, oh, I'm in pain, I've got to get out of it, I'm anxious, I'm sad, move, 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 we're actually reinforcing that we should never feel that way. Sometimes we're taking responsibility for stuff we shouldn't be taking responsibility for. Then we blame ourselves. Well, why should I feel sad? There's something wrong with me why I feel sad. No, it's a sad situation. Why wouldn't you feel sad? And even if your emotions aren't always congruent, that's part of the human experience.
Mhm.
It's easier sometimes to tap into anger, even though it's not an angry making experience. It's what you do with it once you recognize again, once you've noticed and you name it, then what do you do?
Then what do you do? And sometimes you don't have the answer in the moment. Like, not everything will have an answer in the moment. For me, sometimes it is just saying, "Well, I've never felt this before. What is this?" And maybe there isn't a word for it today, and I sit with that. Maybe I just need to be still today,
Mhm,
whatever that is. Unplug, call a friend, have a conversation, and so I just encourage everyone who's feeling that. Like, there's sometimes anticipatory stress,
mhm,
like the anticipation of what tomorrow might hold. There are times when I worry about a bill that's coming next week, like, oh my God, how am I going to pay that? You see it already. I'm holding what am I going to, and so dealing with anticipatory stress, right? And so I just really, I guess I want to leave folks with tips or things that they can do to check in with themselves. Like, what are Give us a few things that for this mental health, may as mental health, that people can do, put in their toolkit to help themselves.
Sure. So there's something called the window of tolerance. If you picture like, your square page, the bottom section is what they call hypoarousal. The middle section is being inside the window of tolerance, and the top part is hyperarousal. First and foremost, I don't like the names. I get all my clients to rename it for words that resonate with them so that
Hmm.
it's better. But it's understanding that in the hyperarousal, this is where we're anxious, we're agitated. It's all the plus, it's all the stuff that's added, the energy that's added, the stuff that revs us up, right? This is where we feel overwhelmed. That's above the window of tolerance, the window that you want to ideally be in.
Hmm.
Below that is where you are hypoarousals, where you have no energy, you just want to crawl into bed, put your blanket over your head, you're numb, you're tapped out. So I often say to people, once you learn that, start obsess first and foremost, where am I in my window? If I'm in a state of hypoarousal, I don't need to relax myself further because I'm not trying to put myself to sleep.
Hmm.
So what can I do to activate myself to bring myself back up into it? So maybe going for a walk is a really great thing at that time because it activates me. Dancing, doing something where there's more movement, those energetic songs, maybe whatever that thing is for you that activates you. So you start to pick your strategies based on where you're at in the window. When you're in a state of agitation and anxious, things that rev you up may actually create more anxiety. So,
Hmm.
what can you do to bring yourself down into that desired window? And for everybody, they have to know what that is, but you learn that stuff over time. I recommend people, um, you know, talk to other people, look stuff up, keep trying different things. In September, I did September is self care month. So, 4 days into the month, I realized there's 26 days left, and I'm going to do alphabet self care. And so, every day I picked as the successive letter of the alphabet to do something that was self-care related. And I tell people all the time, I'll be honest, I did it partly for the postability. This looks great, a therapist posting it, but I was intentional to actually try things. And I learned so many new techniques of things I could do, things that I found helpful, some not so helpful. But because I was looking up, okay, well, it's G. What am I going to do for G? It's H. What am I going to do for H? Some of them in advance I knew. I love going by water. So I was like, on day A, I was like, L is lake. I know that for sure. I'm going to the lake because every time I go to the lake, it resets me, right? Looking at the water. But I got really creative looking stuff up and finding ways to engage in self care and just practices that help bring me into what my window is. And I found that that was fantastic. And then there was an added satisfaction of knowing I was regularly pouring into myself. And I felt
Absolutely.
good about that too.
Absolutely.
I would recommend to people start to, understand where you are in that window. Are you agitated, anxious, angry? Are you highly activated and need to do something that will bring you down? Or are you low and need to do something that activates you? That alone helps you start to choose strategies.
So, here's a question for you. I knew this question would come.
What's the letter X? Oh, Nicole, you need me to be honest. I didn't do X, Y, and Z because my dad died. I did
Um,
a whole month, but my dad died just at the end. But what I found was I felt a little bit more sane in that process because I'd been doing stuff all month long.
right?
So I didn't figure out what X would be because it was right when he was it was right near when he passed, and so I didn't do the last three letters.
You know, I
But I'm going to do it again this September, so she can ask me September 2024 what
well,
X.
maybe we'll have to do a session with you in September for all of those things. You know, I think the beauty of being at this stage of life, 40s and 50s, is rediscovering who we are. Like when we talk about our mental health, it is developing a relationship with ourselves. So number one, we can recognize ourselves when we see ourselves in the mirror. We can call our things as we see them. We can name them. And then knowing ourselves allows us to create space for others to know themselves even more deeply. I I often say that my relationships with particularly Black women, my sister friends, I always feel like that's a safe space for me. You know how much like I come to Toronto, I'm on your couch.
Yes.
You know,
But
for
those we it's conversations that feed your soul. Like I feel fed when I have these times with people. So I totally feel you on that.
yeah, exactly. And so I encourage people to find that like I feel like everybody that is on my social media, like I know all of my friends on social media. If you ever need to reach out to me, if you ever need to talk, if you just need to connect, just reach out. Like I love that, but I also am mindful for myself. I'm learning to also give that to myself. I'm
Mhm.
learning to give the gift of that to myself. I'm learning to be quiet when I need to be quiet. I'm learning to turn down. Nicole says, "Thank you, sisters. This was a much needed conversation." And so I hope this conversation continues. I want to thank you so much,
Thanks
for,
for having me.
yeah,
I will say I actually came with more than one pair of glasses because this is
ooh,
cups of glasses. So my green to go with my green.
there you go.
I felt I couldn't come on your podcast and only wear one pair of glasses because
Boom.
you guys have introduced me to the wonderful world of multiple frames.
There you go. And so I want to remind people that um, cups and glasses out of the Greater Toronto area, openly gray life. I also will fit you for frames. That's what we do. But we realize that vision is about all of it, because if we can see ourselves for who we really want to be, and we're here for all of that. So book an appointment, get online, you see our information there.
Can I say
This,
one more thing?
yes, please
Okay.
do.
Because it's about vision and we're talking mental health. I always use my glasses because mindset and what we think is so important. And we forget that mindsets creates the vantage point. So I see differently this way than I do this way. And
Oh,
I ask
absolutely.
people to think about what prescription are they wearing? Is this I'm not good enough? And when you put it on, you see everything through that lens. Is this I'm not worthy? And when you put it on, you see everything through that lens. So start to learn what what modes of thinking create vantage points through which you interpret your experiences. And
Mm,
that alone will help you start to, when you can start to reframe that stuff, you'll come a long way.
you'll come a long way. I agree. When I'm like this, I feel insecure because I can't see. Oh, I'll give you a prime example. And maybe it's about when I was in St. Vincent this year, I went to another island and I was taking a swim in my clothing and my glasses. So a big wave came overhead and took my glasses out to sea.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, one of my favorite pairs glasses. That meant that I couldn't see anything. I then had to rely on others to support me. And it
Mm,
was a lesson for me that sometimes, when your vision is challenged or you need others, you need to figure out how to ask for that help when you need it. I had to
mm,
ask for, I needed people to get me on the boat to get back. I need people to hold my hand. I need people to make sure that when the boat started rocking, I was in a stable position. All that changed. I had my glasses all day until they got knocked off. And then,
right.
and so yes, Nicole says reframe. Absolutely. Reframe. It helps to reframe. So our what we know we are today changes with our vision. And that's going to change over time. The more we learn who we are in this process, the easier it becomes to be at home with whatever that is for ourselves. So yeah, thanks for that. That analogy was just amazing. It's been
You're
so awesome talking to you.
right.
Thanks
This
for
was great. Listen, I love talking mental health. I can do it every day, all day. So I really appreciate the opportunity to come and have this dialogue with you.
yes, thank you. And so we will be back next week. Um, Hopefully, my partner will be back. I'm going to ask everybody who is on this call tonight to just, like we said, we may not know the thing, right? But if we could just hold space for Nicole and for other people, like they say, everybody's fighting a battle that we just don't know. And
Absolutely.
so you started this conversation by saying it's about compassion. I'm going to ask you to have compassion for yourself. Be kind to yourself. Be good to yourself. Your self talk, man, that's a whole nother conversation. Be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
And by extension, be kind to others. We all need that right now. So
Mhm.
thanks for joining me, and I will see you next time. And have a good evening, everyone. It's
All
been real. Take care.